Welcome back. Today we're diving into our explainer of Mahabharata, Section 3, also known as the Paushya Parva. We are going to untangle a really fascinating, nested journey today. It's packed with unprovoked curses, some incredibly intense physical and spiritual trials, and the inciting incident of a truly legendary sacrifice. If you've been following along, you've probably noticed that the Mahabharata absolutely loves to weave stories within stories. Well, this section is a perfect example of that. We get to see how these seemingly unrelated events just crash right into each other and actually change the course of history.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the curse of the celestial bog, the trials of the disciples, Utanka's impossible task, his journey to the serpent realm, and finally, the vengeance of the snake sacrifice. Let's just dive right in.
Section 1. Curse of the Celestial Dog. So, our story opens out on the plains of Kurukshetra. King Janamejaya is attending this long sacrifice with his brothers, when, completely inexplicably, they mercilessly beat an innocent celestial dog that had just wandered onto the spot. It hadn't even looked at the sacrificial butter.
The dog's mother, the celestial Sarama, confronts the brothers, and when they have absolutely no explanation for their cruelty, she delivers this chilling curse. She says, "As ye have beaten my son who hath committed no fault, therefore shall evil come upon you when you least expect it." The sheer weight of that consequence is terrifying. The king is instantly gripped by panic, right? He completely abandons the sacrifice and just rushes back to Hastinapura to desperately search for some kind of spiritual protection.
What he needs is a Purohita. That's a specialized spiritual master and priest who's actually capable of procuring absolution for a king's sins and neutralizing the effects of a curse. So, while out hunting, Janamejaya finds a renowned ascetic named Somasrava. Now, Somasrava is incredibly powerful. He possesses the full force of his father's asceticism, but he has a highly unusual origin story. He was actually born of a she-snake. Janamejaya appoints him as his Purohita on the spot, but Somasrava has one really strict condition. He says he will grant absolutely anything a Brahmana asks of him. Janamejaya accepts this, and he orders his brothers to blindly comply with whatever Somasrava favors, basically hoping that this absolute obedience will save him from Sarama's sudden curse.
Section 2. Trials of the Disciples. Now, the narrative pivots completely away from the king. We're going to examine the intense cultural devotion required of a disciple, and we do this by looking at a sage named Ayodhya Dalmya and his 3 pupils.
Keep this specific lineage of masters and disciples in mind as we go. Ayodhya Dalmya's first disciple is a young man named Aruni. To test him, the master simply orders Aruni to go stop up a breach in a watercourse out in a field. So Aruni goes, but he realizes he can't fix it with any ordinary means. To fulfill his master's command, Aruni physically lays his own body down into the freezing mud to dam the water. When the master finally goes looking for him and calls him out, he is so moved by this unquestioning devotion that he grants Aruni universal knowledge right then and there and names him Udalaka. The master's second pupil, Upamanyu, gets an even more rigorous test. He's given the task of tending the cows, but his master systematically strips away his ability to eat. First, the master takes all the alms that Upamanyu begs for. Okay, so when Upamanyu begs a second time, the master strictly forbids it, saying it takes food away from others. Then Upamanyu tries drinking some of the cow's milk. The master forbids that too. So he drinks the froth that falls from the calves' mouths. Again, the master forbids it, saying it deprives the calves. Finally, oppressed by just pure blinding hunger, Upamanyu eats the toxic leaves of the arka plant. These pungent properties instantly turn him completely blind, and he stumbles and crawls into a deep pit. The master eventually tracks him down in this well and tells Upamanyu to glorify the twin Ashwins, who are the physicians of the gods. Upamanyu chants this beautiful, complex Vedic hymn, and the Ashwins actually appear and offer him a healing cake. But get this, even starving and completely blind in a pit, Upamanyu refuses to eat the divine cake without his master's permission. He just won't do it. The Ashwins are so thrilled by this absolutely unwavering devotion that they restore his sight, give him golden teeth, and bless him with universal knowledge and fortune.
This brings us to the third disciple, Veda. Veda endures his time serving his master literally like an ox bearing a heavy burden. He bears heat, cold, hunger, and thirst without a single murmur of complaint. And just like the others, this absolute obedience earns him universal knowledge. Eventually, Veda completes his studies and takes on his own pupils, which includes our next main character, Utanka. Now, because Veda suffered so much under his own master, he's uniquely lenient with his students. And importantly, Veda is also appointed as a spiritual guide by King Janamejaya and another monarch, King Paushya.
Section 3. Utanka's Impossible Task. So, while Veda is away on a journey, the women of the house command his pupil, Utanka, to step in and fulfill the master's duties with the preceptress. Utanka flat out refuses. He stays strictly faithful to his master's exact instructions and will not cross that line.
When Veda returns and hears how Utanka behaved, he's incredibly pleased. He grants him leave to depart as a graduate. But Utanka insists on offering a traditional honorarium, a parting gift of gratitude to his master. Veda tells him, go ask the preceptress what she wants. Well, she gives him a highly dangerous, time-sensitive quest. She demands the earrings worn by King Paushya's queen, and Utanka has to return with them in exactly 4 days for a sacred feast. If he fails, she makes it very clear that he'll lose all his good fortune.
Utanka immediately sets out, but on the road he encounters this truly bizarre sight. There's a massive bull and an uncommonly giant man. The giant commands Utanka to eat the bull's dung and drink its urine. Obviously, Utanka hesitates, but the man says, "Do it. Thy master ate of it before." Demonstrating his absolute, unquestioning trust in the path of his preceptor, Utanka actually complies. He consumes the waste, washes up, and continues on his way to King Paushya. And as you'll see in a minute, this bizarre act secretly saves his life. Utanka finally reaches King Paushya. After a bit of trouble involving ritual purity, the queen gladly hands over the earrings. But she gives him a serious warning. Takshaka, the king of the serpents, desperately wants these earrings. After securing them, Paushya offers Utanka a meal, but the food turns out to be cold and actually has hair in it. Utanka is insulted by the unclean food and curses Paushya to go blind. Paushya, furious, fires back and curses Utanka to be without issue. But when Paushya investigates and realizes the food was indeed unclean, he begs for a pardon. Utanka says the blindness will pass, but Paushya cannot revoke his own curse. Paushya explains this fascinating, fundamental difference in their natures. He says a Brahmana's words are sharp like a razor, but his heart is soft like new churned butter. A Kshatriya, on the other hand, their words are soft, but their heart is like a sharp-edged tool, making them unable to easily forgive or take back a curse. Fortunately for Utanka, because the food truly was unclean, Paushya's curse doesn't take effect anyway.
Section 4. Journey to the Serpent Realm. So, Utanka has the earrings, but on his journey back, a naked beggar suddenly snatches them. When Utanka tackles him, the beggar reveals his true form. It's Takshaka, king of the serpents. Takshaka instantly dives into the earth, fleeing down into the subterranean serpent realm.
Utanka is not about to fail his master. He literally grabs a stick and tries to dig after Takshaka, but obviously makes very little progress. Seeing his distress, the god Indra sends his thunderbolt to blast the hole wide open. Utanka tunnels down into this infinite, beautiful realm of palaces and domes. He tries praising the serpents to get the earrings back, but it gets him nowhere. Then, he witnesses some highly symbolic and bizarre visions down there. He sees 2 women weaving black and white threads on a loom, a 12-spoke wheel being turned by 6 boys, and a man with a handsome horse. Utanka chants a beautiful mantra to these figures. Pleased by this, the man tells Utanka to blow into the horse. When Utanka does, flames and smoke pour from every aperture of the horse, filling the serpent realm and nearly burning the whole place down. Terrified, Takshaka rushes out and finally surrenders the earrings. The man on the horse then magically transports Utanka back to his master's house, arriving just as the preceptress is bathing on the 4th day. He made it perfectly on time. Utanka then asks his master to decode the deep Vedic symbolism of his entire journey. The master explains that the weavers were day and night, the 12-spoke wheel and 6 boys were the year and the 6 seasons, and the man and horse were the deities of rain and fire. But the most stunning revelation of all is about the giant man and the bull from the road. The preceptor reveals that the giant man was actually the god Indra, and the bull was his celestial elephant Airavata. And that dung Utanka ate, it wasn't waste at all. It was amrita, the nectar of immortality. It was strictly because Utanka consumed this amrita out of absolute obedience to his master that he survived the deadly serpent realm. His unquestioning devotion literally granted him the divine protection he needed.
Section 5. Vengeance of the Snake Sacrifice. Utanka is now safe, but he is absolutely furious at the serpent king Takshaka for obstructing his sacred duty. So, Utanka travels to Hastinapura to confront a very familiar face, King Janamejaya.
Utanka crashes right back into the king's life and delivers this scorching speech. He basically asks the king why he is spending his time acting like a child when his own father, Parikshit, was murdered by Takshaka. Utanka demands that Janamejaya avenge his father's unprovoked death. He says, "Burn the wicked wretch in the blazing fire of a snake sacrifice." He reveals that Takshaka not only killed the king's father, but even turned away the physician who was coming to save him.
The king, hearing this, is inflamed by Utanka's words, much like a sacrificial fire fed with clarified butter. He immediately turns to his ministers and demands the true particulars of his father's death. When the ministers confirm the circumstances, that his father really died by Takshaka's fangs, Janamejaya is overcome with deep pain and sorrow. Moved by this incredible grief and rage, the king realizes the truth of Utanka's words. He sets his mind on vengeance, setting into motion the monumental snake sacrifice that actually frames this entire epic.
And this just brilliantly illustrates how all these threads connect, right? We started with a king terrified of a dog's curse, we zoomed out to explore the extreme, almost impossible devotion of isolated disciples, and we saw how one disciple's quest for a simple honorarium looped right back around to ignite a king's ultimate vengeance. This nested journey shows us exactly how absolute devotion to a preceptor leads directly to the defining conflict of this era. This series explores the Parvas of the Mahabharata section by section, following the sequence and narrative presented in our source without altering the core story. Our aim is to understand this great epic clearly and systematically. So what will happen when this legendary snake sacrifice finally begins? In the next explainer, we'll continue with Section 4. See you then.